Commissioner of the IRS not to disclose to the House Ways and Means Committee your tax returns?
They'll speak to my lawyers. They'll speak to the Attorney General.
Will you direct the IRS to do that?
They'll speak to my lawyers, and they'll speak to the Attorney General.
The battle over the president's tax returns is heating up after the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee requested Trump's returns from 2013 to 2018. Chairman Richard Neal wants the documents from the IRS by April 10th. That's next Wednesday. Earlier today, Neal was asked what happens if the administration does not comply.
We intend to do follow-up within the 10-day period that was prescribed in the letter and the overture that we made. And then I think there are a series of other options going forward that we will explore, but we've already begun to think about them.
Are you considering subpoenas?
Well, that's something that we would have to consider down the road, but I don't want to kind of at this stage answer really what-if questions.
On a different front, the president has also been feeling increasing pressure from members of his own party this week, just days after Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said closing the border could be potentially catastrophic for the economy. Trump backed off that threat to close the southern border this week.
We're going to give them a one-year warning, and if the drugs don't stop or largely stop, we're going to put tariffs on Mexico and products, in particular cars. The whole ball game is cars. It's the big ball game. With many countries, it's cars. And if that doesn't stop the drugs, we close the border.
Hours later, Trump had this to say to reporters in the Oval Office.
I don't think we'll ever have to close the border because the penalty of tariffs on cars coming into the United States from Mexico at 25% will be massive.
So the border stays open at least for a year?
No, I didn't say that. We would start with the tariffs, and we'll see what happens.
And there was another Trump about-face this week. Remember, it was just Monday when the president suddenly hit the brakes on the idea of replacing Obamacare before the 2020 election. That coming after Mitch McConnell told him the Senate would not take up comprehensive health care reform. Here to talk about all of this, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter David Fahrenthold of The Washington Post and Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press. John, let me start with you. Okay, Congress wants the president's tax returns, sent the letter to the IRS. The IRS, under the Treasury Department, part of the Trump administration. Who is making the call on whether the IRS is going to comply with this, and what's the call going to be? Do we have a sense?
We know this, that the taxes have loomed large for this president for a long time. While he was a candidate, he broke with decades of tradition and did not release his returns. You know, he certainly has made no move to do so once taking office, claiming time and time again that he's under audit, though he's provided no evidence thereof. And in fact, Michael Cohen, when he testified before the House a few weeks ago, suggested when he worked for the president, he never saw any evidence of it either. He went on to say, I don't believe they are under audit. The sound clip, the video clip you guys just played is very telling, where the president said, well, they have to talk to the Attorney General, which shows you, again, how he believes the Attorney General works for him. Is sort of his personal lawyer rather than, being the lawyer for the United States of America. The White House, people I've talked to in the last day or so, they're still trying to figure out strategy, what they're going to do. But I think it's a pretty safe bet they're not just going to hand over these returns by the deadline next week. The president, he pushed. There's some good reporting in the New York Times tonight about how he wanted the IRS counsel to be sort of his confirmation to be expedited earlier this year, even ahead of Attorney General William Barr when that seat was open. This is something that's on his mind. White House people I've talked to said they're devising him, whether it's Steve Mnuchin's being involved or Barr or leading on the IRS or just simply slow walking. This is not something they're going to cooperate with anytime soon.
It sounds like a future that does involve potentially subpoenas and courts perhaps.
That's a safe guess, yes.
Getting involved. Well, David, let me ask you about this, too, because, look, obviously intense curiosity around the question of Donald Trump's taxes. There is a tradition, a modern tradition in presidential politics that candidates from both parties release their returns. But we should say that's a voluntary tradition. Trump voluntarily said, hey, I'm not going to turn them over in 2016. There is no law compelling candidates to do that. Now, there is this 1924 law that allows a couple of chairmen in Congress to request tax returns. But what is the pretense here that Neal, the chairman of the committee, is invoking? What's the justification for saying, hey, I want to see the taxes beyond curiosity?
Well, I think the justification from the Democrats and from Neil has been that there could be something in there that shows either that the president is breaking tax laws or that the president is the subject of some sort of undue foreign influence, that we might learn something from those tax returns about sources of his funding or sources of leverage by foreign governments over him. It's hard to know, I think, until they see them, but those seem to be the kinds of arguments they're making. And you're right that this is not really the kind of this provision from 1920 hasn't really ever been tested. So it's hard to know whether those arguments are going to be thrown back at them or whether they're going to work.
Right. I mean, that's the question here. I guess if you're the Trump administration, do you have a sense what is the strongest argument you could make against this?
The argument that they have made and that will continue to make is that this is presidential harassment. It's a fishing expedition. These are Democrats who don't like Trump, and they're seeking to embarrass him by revealing the private details of his tax returns. It's not what the statute contemplates, which is sort of an effort to make sure the tax laws are being faithfully executed. It's an effort to, sort of just embarrass Trump. That said, the Trump administration is going to say no matter what. I mean, in the matter of that they usually approach problems like this, they may offer some token explanation, but they're just not going to do it. I can't see them ever doing this.
John, this issue of first health care earlier in the week, now the border. You've twice seen this, the president sort of having his instincts, it would appear, reined in by Mitch McConnell's political judgment.
Right. Let's be clear. No one here is controlling Donald Trump. He makes his own decisions, often at a whim, often at a moment's notice on Twitter or because he's reacting to something he saw on television. But it is telling in this last week, this is now twice, where he's received pressure from his own party and has done an about-face. First, earlier in the week, as you just said, was health care. This sort of out-of-nowhere push again to make the Republican Party the party of health care, as he said. After time and time again failing to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, there was great division in the party and within the West Wing itself as to whether that was something they should do right now. For at least a few days, for about a week, the president was going forward and said we should do this. And then after a number of influential Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, suggested, let's tap the brakes here. He eventually backs off. He punts it. He says we're going to deal with it down the road. And now today, even for him, his signature issue, of course, as we know, is the border. It's immigration. It's fortifying with the wall at the Mexican border, but also now this threat of closing that border because of trying to stop what he says is the threat of illegal immigration. And it was an avalanche of worry from fellow Republicans about this, suggesting it would devastate the economy, that it would be a terrible issue heading into the next year's elections, that it would just be, there are moral concerns. It was just sort of, he was told time and time again, don't do this. McConnell very clearly saying, this is a mistake. Other Trump advisors taking to the airwaves. Often the best way to reach the president is to do so through an interview on Fox News and Fox and Friends. We saw a lot of that, including Newt Gingrich yesterday saying that Mr. President should not do this. And then suddenly today we have him reversing himself, saying it won't be necessary and suggesting that Mexico, he wouldn't need to because Mexico would really upped their enforcement at the border. Mexican officials said they've done nothing different. This seems pretty clear the president was looking for a way out. He didn't want to have to follow through on this now.
It's interesting, though, David, when Republicans from the Mitch McConnell wing of the party, if you want to call that, relieved the president not going down that health care road like he was talking about, perhaps relieved on this issue with the border, but also maybe a reminder to them that, hey, as you look ahead to 2020, it is still April of 2019, and you have that possibility at any given moment, you're going to turn on Twitter, perhaps, and see the president taking you in a direction you weren't expecting to go.
I think that's right. I mean, what they've learned also is that the president rarely, with exceptions, the president rarely follows these policy whims very far. He'll throw them out, talk about them for a few days, but he doesn't have any substance behind him. And the two things you've cited, those were instances where there wasn't some significant faction of the Republican Party that wanted to go forward with Trump's idea. Everybody thought it was a terrible idea or something they didn't want to get involved in. So it wasn't like that he had anybody to sort of pick up the ball and run with it after he threw the idea out. I think the way Mitch McConnell views the political problem of the next election is that they're going to hunker down, not propose very much, and then cast the Democrats as the party of radicalism, as the party of socialism. And so I think he's trying to get through to Trump. Look, the best way to win this election is just to keep your mouth shut and hunker down. Trump may be listening to that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.